which hopefully will tease out some of these themes. So, Pooja, I'd like to start with you. So, we're living in a time of growing geopolitical conflict and rising polarization, as I'm sure that we're all very well aware. And most national and regional conflicts throughout history, you could say, arise out of contested stories of land, belonging, and identity, and those are all themes very relevant to spiritual ecology. So my question would be, how does the deep ecology lens help us to view conflict differently, and how can it offer practical tools for peace?
I would like, good, hi, namaste everyone. Thank you Clare, thank you St. Burgers for this, and this is an honor. I would like to say she threw me in at the deep end, but I received the question a week ago, so I have a little time to prepare. It's very interesting. I think when I shifted from a wildlife conservation and wildlife research kind of an angle, Clare, into spiritual ecology and deep ecology work, it started with a basic gap that I felt when I was talking to children, and I was talking very passionately about tiger conservation. And I had a child raise a hand and say, this is great and I understand it's important, but what am I supposed to do about it? And here I'm talking to a 10 or 12-year-old sitting in an urban school in the capital of India, in Delhi, absolutely stumped as to how to answer this question and how to empower or inspire this child to make any difference to the story of conservation that I was believing in, because the kid probably hadn't seen a tiger and it would be a while before he maybe went to the forest. So that started this spiritual ecology journey for Protectera and for me personally, as to how do people actually start connecting with something that maybe they can't touch, feel, have a direct experience with, have an embodied or witnessed experience with. And it begged the question as to what was the gap that I was seeing. Why is it that people are disconnected? And it brought me to where maybe, about 12 years later today, I'm at the fact that, deep ecology is essentially asking everybody to tap into compassion, tap into this ancestral knowing that we already have, that the earth is a shared planet. It isn't, we're not proposing something that is quantum physics. It's just always existed. We share this planet, but somehow we forget it. So what has helped me with a lot of the work that we do back in India, with majority of the times with children, is the fact that this planet is a shared planet, that the deep ecology lens or the spiritual ecology lens is about the fact that she gives us food, she gives us water, the air that we breathe, the sun that shines, all of it is coming completely free of cost with no charge, relentlessly, continuously, all the time. How are we feeling disconnected from this? So the conflict I have always felt in people's mind is that there's an illusion of separation from the earth, and that is where the work that we do lies. And the tools we've been using to address the conflict of separation more than anything else, right? There's geopolitical conflict and there's war and there's a lot more in it. But I believe that the baseline comes from a lack of complete disconnect with people and with nature as well, with each other as well. So one of the tools, because sharing from experience, has been something as simple as engaging the children to notice the sun as it shines every morning, and allowing them a moment of simple mindfulness that, he's up there with no difference every day, shining the same for race, gender, geographical region, whatever it is, without saying, ooh, I don't want to shine for you, or I'm going to shine a little more dim because you're of a different skin or you're of a different socioeconomic background. So something that we've been doing is getting the children or getting anybody and everybody to really notice the sun in the sky, because he's there. Well, if you're in England, sometimes he's missing, but we see the sun a lot more in India. But really noticing that and giving tools of mindfulness quite a bit, which helps then create deeper inroads.
That's beautiful, and part of what I hear you talking about there is the kind of inner conflict, or what does it mean to resolve an inner conflict or inner sense of disconnect between the self and the natural world and the more than human world. And I think that I hear that as a theme in your work as well, Scelo. And I'd be keen to hear from you, sort of when you take groups out into the wilderness, using traditional indigenous skills for relating to land, is there a time when you saw a conflict, sort of either within yourself or in another, or between people, that was resolved through relating to the more than human world, or are there teachings sort of that you would take from the more than human world related to conflict?
Thank you so much for the opportunity, and bless you all. It's hard for me to implement more like the Western part of resolving the issues and facing healings here, because these are the rituals that we're still doing in my village. But going straight to the answer is we still, today now, in the villages, we're still going through the rituals where we can have a look at what is the cause of the conflict and how can the conflict resolve. Normally all that takes place under the tree or in nature, where all the community members will sit, all work together, women, children, males, elders, trying to resolve the conflict. And it's happening in nature. Nature gives us an opportunity, and the elders conduct the rituals by telling us to look at the weather. Why there's clouds? What does it mean to have clouds when we're having this ritual? Why there is a lot of sun burning? Why the air is hot? Why so much heat? And all that can include in a part of finding the solution that is troubling the community. It is the ritual that is still alive today. I don't want to look and focus on the therapy and ecotherapy. All is important, but I'm talking about an old ancient rituals that we're still practicing today. The answer is yes. In nature, the community can find peace. Individually can find peace. And you can also find your own seeds of how you deal with the conflict. And through looking at the weather, through looking at the wind, it's all there. The solutions are all there. Grieving as well, it's also like that. When somebody lost a partner, a woman lost a partner, or a man lost a partner, we go into nature to grieve, and we cut our hairs, and it's a part of the new journey. We cut our hairs, we bury them in nature, and it's a part of that. We are now taking another journey. We grieve, we cry on the earth, we allow our tears to fall on the ground. It is a part of it. I'm not talking about what have been in the books. I'm talking about what we're doing now, what is alive today in the village. So yes, all this is still happening. It's happening now as I'm talking. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Scelo. Thank you. So I have a question for you, Helena. So this is a question about polarization. We're hearing a lot about polarization and echo chambers nowadays, and lots of studies have been conducted on this. And one of them that I'd just like to highlight is a study that was conducted here in the UK in 2024, which was the Khan Review into Threats to Democratic Resilience and Social Cohesion. I think that was the title. And one of the quite striking findings that their research highlighted was that 76% of people surveyed reported that they frequently would withhold their honest views for fear of facing some kind of backlash or retribution. And I think what was quite startling about this particular survey, or maybe it's not startling, maybe it's what we would almost expect to see, is that 76% wasn't like highly concentrated in any one or other particular political or cultural tribe. This was really universally across different political, cultural backgrounds. this kind of universal feeling that people have that the space of public discourse is no longer a free space for dialogue, which is obviously of concern for anyone who's interested in looking at peace and conflict, because if you can't talk about problems, then it's going to be much harder to address them and resolve them. And so the question that I would like to ask you, Helena, is if you see these kinds of echo chamber dynamics or polarization dynamics happening in the spaces that you work in deep ecology or localization spaces, how you see that happening, and where, if anywhere, you see people working with that in a constructive way.
Well, I've been at this for 50 years and in so many different countries, and got so much to say, but the short of it is that I'm passionate about trying to urge people to join small, human-scale, local groups to talk face-to-face, rather than trying to conduct these conversations in the social media. And I am seeing that when people are able to look each other in the eye, talk to each other, across racial divides, across political divides, the tension reduces generally, not always, but with everything today, I believe that we need to be more aware of a global economic system that is global, meaning that is reaching into every corner of the planet now, and that economic system is responsible for pushing the whole social media, the internet, the mobile phone, and the platforms that have emerged are part and parcel of an economic system that we need to understand better. And it can be very difficult to get people to want to look at it because it sounds so big, it sounds immediately as though we can't do anything about it. But what I realized a long time ago is that we can do a lot about it if we start working at the local level and rebuilding the fabric of community. That it's a community fabric that allowed us to evolve in our deep spiritual, ecological connection to the living world. This is who we are. We formed our cultures, our languages, our identities in that deep communion between humans and nature, in place, in the local. And what I experienced with many cultures is that when people were secure in their local economy, they were infinitely more tolerant of difference. They welcomed difference. Difference didn't scare them. And what's happened is that we're all being driven into an ever more artificially scarce economy. We're struggling to pay the rent, we're struggling to put food on the table, and that's from Africa to England, to every part of the world, even my native country of Sweden. Talking about that in these more human-scale groups can be remarkably healing, and when we move on from that to actually start building more localized structures, that is even more beneficial in a multitude of ways, because it reduces emissions, it reduces the need for plastic. So the localizing path is a deeply spiritual, ecological path, and it's one that increases our respect for diversity, our love for life, our ability to feel compassionate, kind, and generous. But it takes quite a while maybe to share this in a way that might get you all interested. I'd love to encourage you all to think about a further conversation of this issue, and we have lots of materials that are being used in local groups around the world.
Thank you so much, Helena. And yeah, really hear that call to engage with these conversations in real life, in person, and in community, and not online and not through technology, which leads me on to my question for Alastair, which is somewhat about this theme of technology. So I'm just going to say a bit about where this question came from inside of me. So I, not long ago, read James Lovelock's, one of his last books called Novacene. James Lovelock, founder of the Gaia theory, obviously a very influential figure in deep ecology, although I think he sort of went back and forth, was critical of the environmental movement and so on. But in his last book, Novacene, he predicts the end of the Anthropocene and the beginning of the Novacene, which is basically the beginning of a new era dominated by artificial intelligence life forms. I'm just going to read a quote from this book. He writes, "I think it's crucial that we should understand that whatever harm we have done to the earth, we have just in time redeemed ourselves by acting simultaneously as parents and midwives to the cyborgs. They alone can now guide Gaia through the astronomical crises now imminent." So I was very haunted by this book. And regardless of what you think of this theory or of James Lovelock, what I do notice is that there are kind of different camps within the deep ecology space who hold quite different attitudes towards technology that can also sometimes reflect a kind of intergenerational divide. I think sometimes deep ecology, I confess myself, I probably fall into this as well, you can sort of engage in a fantasy projection of a future somehow free of technology, which when we're all hurtling at top speed towards a hyper-technologized future. And then I see others in the deep ecology space who I sometimes worry are edging in this direction of James Lovelock, perhaps trying to broker a truce or a positive relationship with technology that at times feels as though human beings and technology are in existential conflict with one another. And I suppose that's... So my question to you, Alastair, is what do you make of these different perspectives within the deep ecology space? And as a Celtic Christian deep ecologist, sort of what do Christian values teach us about walking into this hyper-technologized landscape?
Thank you, Clare. And we've had quite a bit of discussion about this question over the past week. And I very much connect with what Helena was just saying, whose book, incidentally, Ancient Futures, Learning from Ladakh, has been a very important book in our teaching in the Centre for Human Ecology in Edinburgh. So your question, Claire, is basically about the place of high technology, particularly artificial intelligence. We've been debating a lot, and where that leaves us in terms of human beings, and whether we see our future in some kind of cyborg way, some kind of transhuman future, or what. And Claire, to answer that question, I'm going to not give the answer directly myself. I'm going to ask our host, Saint Ethelberg, to answer this question. Oh, I'm sorry, am I going to block your camera? And the reason I'm going to do this is because of the news just now from last night about the intensification of conflict war between Israel and Iran now. And the inscription here, "Oh, pray for the peace of Jerusalem," from Psalm, I think it's 122. And what is Ethelberger showing us here? Ethelberger is answering the question of technology. Ethelberger is showing us what it actually means to be a human being, because the question is, are we simply biological machines? The brain, a biological computer? In which case a cyborg transhuman future, in fact, with my powerful hearing aids connected up here, I'm already partly cyborg in that sense, but that... So before we talk of intelligence or artificial intelligence, where's it coming from? Is the brain cause or consequence? Is our consciousness and intelligence coming out of the brain? In which case, yes, the future is moving beyond human. Look at this image here. Look what she's showing us. In her left hand, she's got the crook. She's in control. The human side of her work, which was after seeing a vision of a bright light of God amongst the poor, eventually herself dying in a plague in the 7th century. Her human work is very grounded in the material realm. But her other hand is reaching out. And what's it reaching out towards? Look above her hand, and you see, I think how it interprets this, it's a vision from Ezekiel of the river flowing from underneath the threshold of the temple. And there you see Ezekiel's river flowing out, and both at the end of Ezekiel and at the end of the book of Revelation, right at the end of the New Testament, the river becomes a mighty stream that waters both sides of the bank, not just our own side, but both sides, and nourishes the trees on both sides. Notice the trees in the bottom left down here. Notice also, I think, the fir trees and the high forest up there. Both types of forest, both types of community, all being nourished. For what purpose? So that, as the New Testament puts it, the leaves will be for the healing of the nations. Therefore, pray for the peace of Jerusalem, because unless Jerusalem, and metaphorically we ourselves also, can be at peace within ourselves, there will be no peace for the world. But the crucial thing here is the ontology, what it means for being. She is not a secular activist. She's not doing it all herself with the crook that is in her left hand there. She's also reaching out in spiritual discernment. She's also reaching out from the flow of God that is coming from underneath the threshold of the temple. And that is a challenge to artificial intelligence. Can you do it all within a mighty computer and then let the computer and robots do it all themselves? Or does intelligence, does consciousness, does the power of love mean so much more that the future is in our small communities? The future is face to face. It's not until you come here and see that sitting here all day yesterday that that can open up, because we are face to face in a holy space.
Hooray.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Alastair. Thank you.
Can I also say that I knew Lovelock, and I was quite disappointed that my deep ecology colleagues so warmly brought him into these circles at Schumacher College and various places, because even when he first became this green hero, he was in favor of nuclear power, and he believed that we needed synthetic agriculture. And to me, synthetic food. He was already back in the 90s talking about we couldn't afford agriculture. And to me, that's deeply ignorant. It ignores the fact that there have been farms for tens of thousands of years around the world, and it bought into what has been actually a type of corporate propaganda that we humans went downhill the minute we got settled and started growing food. It is not true, and part of the localization movement is to bring back more localized, diversified, self-reliant food economies so that people have the right to feed themselves. We do not need genetic engineering. We do not need large corporations to feed the world. We need to be able to feed ourselves around the world.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Helena. Thank you. All right, we've got about... Oh, yes, please do. Yes.
I'm going to quote somebody I would usually not quote, but Mr. Gandhi, who a lot of us will know, Mahatma Gandhi, said very beautifully, building on Helena, that the earth has enough to satisfy every person's need. It does not have enough to satisfy every person's greed. And I think a very crucial question that deep ecology or spiritual ecology or St. Ethelberger might pose to all of us is in this age of wanting everything conveniently and quickly and immediately, why are we farming at factory farms? Why are we going so crazy in trying to have surplus and so on and so forth? So the idea of growing our own food, for example, or really looking at local living economies will stem from really starting to ask ourselves the question, which I think finds itself in all kinds of ancient texts, is this something I want or is this something I need? And how much are we consuming or asking or demanding because we want it, as opposed to whether I actually really need it? And I think this greed that us as a species have, because I don't see tigers or snakes filling up their larders with loads of cheeses, right? So it's a very human construct, unfortunately. So, that question also gives a lot of answers to so many that, what are we filling in our cupboards or our fridges, and is that why there's so much pressure on the earth as well? It seems simple, but it's also a rejig inside, right?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pooja. I'd like to also just offer an opportunity. Scelo, would you like to respond to anything that any of the other panelists have said up until this point?
Yeah. Back home during the COVID, I think we faced the moment where we opened the eyes, because we could see that a lot of things were not happening. And some of the things that we were worried about was the food security. And today there are still children in Africa that goes to bed without food. But COVID has ignited the spirit of having your own garden, your own vegetable garden, and therefore people become more self-sustainable. And then within the locals, people were sharing seeds and take these seeds, and then I will take this. People started sharing more. So as though COVID came with a lot of darkness, but there is a lot of things that we have learned that we should take care of ourselves during the COVID, because a lot of things were evaporating. So what we're talking about today, it's something that touches me because I'm coming from Africa and we still experience the poverty today. But again, I think my son used to say, poverty attacked the brain first before it consumed your body. So it means that if you take care of your earth and you put seeds in the earth and you put organic compost in the earth, it's therefore the soil and the earth itself can sustain you. So I don't know about artificial intelligence. I just catch it along. I just don't know about it.
I don't think any of us know. I don't think any of us know, Scelo. Thank you so much. I think we've got a really brief time to hear some questions from the audience, and I wonder if we could just harvest a few questions. Thanks, Harriet. So if you've got a question, please put up your hand and Harriet will come to you with the mic.
Hi, thank you for a fantastic talk. One thing that I'm curious about that hasn't really come up is the relationship of the fields that you're working in, deep ecology, and actual sort of political thoughts, ideologies, etc., etc. At what point, is there any, because you've mentioned consumerism, greed, avarice, which are often a byproduct of capitalism, and that kind of Marcuse talked about the manufactured needs, etc., etc. So do you, in your own specific practices, do you have any relationship with particular political ideologies that you feel are more in tune with the kind of work that that share some of the values? Because again, as I was listening to you, I couldn't help but think about certain Marxist thoughts about alienation and commodification and so on and so forth. So, at what level is there any is there any connection that you form with any political movements in terms of advancing this conversation into a more mainstream arena that more people can engage with in a meaningful way?
I'm happy to say something about that.
Just take just a few questions, please.
Hello, thank you for the insight already. I recognise that many people can feel quite conflict averse, quite frightened of the idea of conflict and argument. And I'd be really interested for any panelist who feels particularly called to answer this is, could you tell us what some of the benefits of conflict can be in your work? And in my mind, I think of it as like the sandpaper that finally polishes the table, gets it to that nice finish. So any examples where conflict has been actually a beneficial component to a specific project or your work in general?
Given that the world is developing so fast into the tech realm, do you have any reflections on what you suggest individuals to keep out of that or create alternatives and not step into that realm, which becomes more and more, going into our lives without even much choice?
Maybe one more.
I'd just like to kind of go on the political side of things, just like kind of carry on what he said. Do you feel that localization and creating local economies is like a better alternative to, I don't know, like civil disobedience and getting people on the streets? And because for me, I've just kind of started into the activist world, and when I hear people speak about their plans or their protests, it just feels quite nonsensical. But I also understand the importance in acknowledging like both sides. I'm not sure if this is a very clear question, but I guess I'm asking if it feels also, because to me like localization feels like a very political movement, and does that like take, can those movements like stop the movements from happening on the streets? If that makes sense. I'm sorry, I probably didn't word that very well, but yeah.
Great. Okay, thank you. I'm going to try and sum up all four of those questions and then give each of you an opportunity to respond. And please feel free to respond to whichever question. Don't feel that you have to, I think we'll cover it all, but don't feel that you each have to answer all four questions. So I think the first question was somewhat, what is your political stance, or is there a necessary politics to deep ecology? Are deep ecologists necessarily anti-capitalist? Are any of you Marxists? Right? So what is your political thinking, and how is that connected in with your deep ecology? Then a question about how conflict can be generative. We can often be conflict avoidant. Very good point. So how can conflict be a positive thing, right? We often have a resistance, or I would certainly say in English culture, that may be also quite culturally determined how people engage with conflict. So English culture can be very conflict avoidant. Are there ways that we can find what's positive or generative in having conflict with each other? The next question returned to this theme about technology, and do you have practical ideas and solutions for how people can kind of disentangle themselves from what feels like the inevitability of like living in this hyper-technologized world? And then I understood the last question to be raising, coming from an activist perspective, with that sense of, what do we do about the urgency of these overwhelmingly enormous and existentially threatening problems that we're facing, right? You're asking that question about urgency. Is that right? And how how do these responses kind of meet that scale of risk that we're facing? Is that a fair way of summing it up? So those are the 4 questions, and whoever would like to jump in. Helena, would you like to?
Yeah, and I hope some of you will come later because I'll be able to go into greater length, because that question about politics and capitalism, I think, is incredibly important. And I also wanted to say that, yes, we're saying that this is the human sort of species that has a tendency to greed, but we need to remember that there was planning using Freud's nephew's insights into psychology to create consumerism after the Second World War. We've been victims of a system that, yes, it's capitalist, but it's capitalist with a capital C, and that's because it's been global. And that's why once you really look at that global nature of it, we will also see that the politics of today, left, right, have become meaningless. So our socialist governments in Scandinavia have gone with essentially a corporate, global, commercializing, techno path that unfortunately is also linked to fear in the intelligence community that there's this tsunami of technological change and that they have to stay ahead. So there's a real push for high tech, and that means more mining, it means using more water to replace humans, where in most of the things we care about, the caring for the earth, the planting of the seeds, looking after the water, everything that lives, looking after our children, the aged, everything we care about, we need more humans in the equation. But sadly, not because of evil people in politics or corporations. I'm absolutely convinced it's a blind adherence to outdated economic dogma that have taken them on a path of supporting global businesses at the expense of local, supporting energy and capital-intensive production at the expense of human, real, creative, truly entrepreneurial production. So we're on this path where our leaders are blindly pursuing a deadly path, and AI will take that further. So I believe that the most important thing that we can do is to realize, oh, we have what's called a polycrisis. Why does everything seem so unstable, so insecure? Why? What's happening? I am absolutely convinced from lots of experience that this is not because of human nature, it's not because of human greed, it's because of a blind support of a system that we end up supporting ourselves because we don't understand it. So for me, the activism is big picture activism, where we take some time in a group, change the I to a we, to think about these crises in a holistic way. And then the resistance, the politics we're going to need is to demand a fundamentally new politics, and it will be one of decentralization or localization. So, and that goes beyond. It will be an ism that ends all isms. We don't want top-down centralized structures. We want to empower communities. But it's, you know, obviously the steps in between are a bit complicated. So, yeah. Anyway.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Helena. Helena.
I want to club 2 questions, the one about how conflict can be regenerative and the politics part. So in India, our current ruling party is quite pro-development, but they're also very pro-local living. Okay, they're doing a lot of promotion of local crafts, local Indian-made, homemade, and so on. Interestingly, I do not subscribe to our current ruling party at all, because they are not very pro-environment, and I have a very deep bias towards the environment. But yes, it puts me in a situation of conflict to go to the other side and really step out of my comfort zone to win over somebody who's not won over. And yesterday in a session about polarization, we spoke about reconciliation and activism trying to win over, and reconciliation about trying to, reach a common ground to try and make change. So conflict, because I feel so much conflict with our largely ruling political parties or even local political parties, it gives me more chance to actually think about the fact that I need to go to that side and try to show them our point of view rather than run away from the fact that it's going to cause so much conflict. So I think conflict, at least for me and the organization's work, and I see in children's quarrels when they're slinging mud at each other, is usually a huge call to look at how they could have been kinder, how they could have maybe stepped out of their map of the world and gone to the other map and seen what can be done. Because in echo chambers and this room, we all feel very similarly about a lot of the stuff that's happening on our planet. The fun really begins when you go to the person on the other side who doesn't feel the same way at all. And then you're faced with, okay, somebody used the word in a talk yesterday saying, am I completely woo-woo? Because they're certainly seeing me as woo-woo. And then really asking them to see the point of view. So I think conflict presents an opportunity. I'll shy away from it on most days, but it seems to come to me all the time. And anybody who's watching online from India is saying, yes, you got this one right. But yeah, I think conflict presents an opportunity to go to the other side and really bridge the divide.
Oh, lovely. Thank you, Pooja.
100% agree. Really, I always look at it as a big storm. Everything is in turmoil. And when you face conflict, at the end, it gives birth of tranquility and peace. It's good that it's happening, but how we can face conflict, what caused it, and then it can be easily resolved. It's better about how we do it with the heart, how we do put ourselves into it when we become it, and then at the end, then the storm will be over. So I support what you're sharing. Thank you.
Thank you, Scelo. Alastair, I'm aware we have two questions. The question about, from an activist perspective, about the urgency of the moment and how to rise and respond to that, and what how deep ecology can speak to that.
Sorry, the urgency of the moment
and how deep ecology responds to this urgency.
How deep ecology responds, yeah.
And we had another question, the question about how to disentangle ourselves from the juggernaut of technology and how it kind of eats into so much of our lives. I think those two questions have not yet been responded to by the other panelists. So just invite you if you have anything to say in response to those.
Well, I think on the second question, the question of technology, the fundamental question is, what is it serving? I mean, here we are in a sacred place. Jesus' first question, or first response to the disciples, was, what seek ye? What are you seeking? The fundamental question, discernment. In using technology, which most of us do, in using technology, discern, what is it serving? Does it serve that which gives life? And then on the second question, in terms of politics and how we engage in the activist world just now, again, look at the patron saint. Look at the, if you want it in psychological terms, the archetypal principle being expressed through this figure. Her whole movement, the whole movement of that remarkable image is that she's flowing in that river of life that issues from underneath the threshold of the temple, that issues from the source of the divine, whether you consider that Buddha nature, or Brahman, or Tao, or Allah, or Christ. To me, it makes no difference, provided it is all about love and spirituality as the flow of love as life made manifest. She's moving in that, and she's moving between the type of deciduous trees at the bottom and the conifers at the top. She's moving across both sides of the bank. Therefore, we must flow with the fullness of community. That is why Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount said, love your enemies, pray for those who do harm for you, because that is the only way we can transform that which results in death towards that which gives life.
Thank you so much. What an incredible moment to end this wonderful conversation. Thank you, Alastair, Scelo, Helena, and Pooja. Please join me in giving a very warm thank you to our panelists.
And thank you to Clare.
Oh, thank you. What a joy and a privilege it has been for me to be in conversation with you. Just a few brief announcements. We're going to now take a 15-minute break. In the nave, we're going to start again at 12:30 for a talk titled Growing with the Earth, Spiritual Ecology for India's Next Generation with Pooja Bhale. Please do come back for that. And in the tent at 12:45, we have the Patchwork of Belonging workshop with facilitators Nessie Reed and Lauren Ililhi. So thank you very much and see you again very soon. Thank you.